Okay, we are talking to Seth Godin. How are you today, sir?
I'm fantastic. Thank you for having me, Kevin.
All right. I love the background with the books. I'm a big book guy. What was the last good book that you've read lately?
I'm halfway through Red Team Blues by Cory Doctorow, which is one of those juicy thrillers that is sometimes thoughtful, but mostly fun. And before that, I'm all over the map in what I'm listening to. I like books about time travel, but I also like books about how our culture works and justice and possibility. So I can't just pick one. I'm bad at that, I'm afraid.
No, it's fine. I have so many books where I go through one halfway and it's like, oh my God, what's this book? And I keep on bouncing around from book to book.
No penalty for not finishing a book. It's allowed.
It's allowed. So the reason we're talking to you today is about your new book, The Song of Significance, Manifesto of Teams. I really enjoyed the title, The Song of Significance, because it sounds like a Paul Simon lyric.
What a nice thing to say.
Yeah, well, it does. It's like, oh, this sounds like a nice book about songs. But so what inspired that title?
So a woman named Jacqueline Freeman is a feral beekeeper. She's not feral. The bees are feral. But she wrote a book called The Song of Increase. And that is her name for what happens every year at the end of a long winter when a beehive swarms. We're talking about 15,000 bees leaving the hive in a 10-minute period of time. They leave behind all the babies, all the honey, and a brand new queen. Mm-hmm. And they leap into a place they don't know what's going to happen. And then when they get there, they form a tight little ball, which I call the Song of Safety, where for 3 days, they've got to hang out before they find a new place to live. If they don't find a new place to live, they're all going to die. And so that mindset of just holding on super tight, that's what so many people in our world have been doing since the pandemic and even before, singing the Song of Safety and trying to just survive. And we're not bees, but we can leap if we want to. And the Song of Significance is about our choice to do work that matters with people who care, to have the best job we ever had, to actually make a difference, not just be a cog in some system.
You know, sometimes when I see people and they don't seem to care, like you wrote in your book about people being disposable, how companies just saying, oh, you're disposable. I often wonder, like, where does that come from? Because I live by an elementary school and you see like little kids playing and they're little kids, but sometimes they have fun and they're together. Yeah. But somewhere along the way, things get screwed up. And I don't know where that happens.
It's not an accident, Kevin. They got it burned out of them on purpose by a system that was built by factory owners to train us to be bureaucrats and factory workers, to train us to take what we are given, to train us to ask, will this be on the test? Right? That when you're in 5th grade, if you're defective, you know what they do? They hold you back and they process you again, just like in the factory. And there's all this pressure from people who care about us to get a good job, to go to the placement office, to not quit our job, to not have too much turnover, all of the stuff that industrialism invented. But that's not natural. It's not what we want. And we put up with it because it made us rich. It produced, 150 years ago, the average person in the United States owned 2 pairs of pants and 2 pairs of shoes. And it created all this stuff that we need storage units for. And it amplified wealth disparity, but it also made it so that the poorest weren't as poor as they used to be. And the end result of all of this is we have accepted the fact that humans are a resource, that we're simply a machine to be jerked around. The phrase jerking someone around came from the Henry Ford factory, where workers were dancing this way and that because they had to make the machines work better. And from a business point of view, it doesn't work anymore because we don't make stuff. You and I don't go to a place with a shovel or, a punch press. We make decisions. We make a difference. To do that work, we got to unlearn everything we learned in elementary school.
Is that possible? Because I think there are people who actually, this kind of ties into your book. I thought during the pandemic, with remote work, I thought that was a moment of time where we can really change the paradigm of businesses, because people were saying like, you know what, I enjoy remote work. I can take my kids to school. If I need to go to a doctor's appointment, that's fine. I can still I can get my work done early, late, but they were still being productive. And I said, you know what? Once we get out of this thing, this is great. But then I started hearing about companies saying, well, we're going to put monitors on your production and making sure you're working. It's like, why are you doing this? People are finally happy and they're doing the work. Why do you want to be a big brother on them and just say, well, we're going to monitor you anyway because we don't trust you, even though they were getting the work done?
Right. Because you're a machine and they've got to tune you up to get everything they can out of you, instead of saying what we need is to create possibility. And if we have people who are earnestly and eagerly on the journey with us, enrolled, we'll get more than if we count keystrokes and put people under surveillance. But what makes someone a manager is they like the authority. They want to tell people what to do.
It's so unfortunate. And it doesn't have to be this way. Because even when I was a younger guy, I had a part-time job. And we might have hated our job, but we kind of liked the boss. And we kind of liked working there, even though it was crap pay. But it's just the idea of, I'll stay after work for a few hours. It's crap pay, but I like the people, I like the job. But it doesn't seem like these managers in these businesses don't seem to understand. When people are happy, they will do more for you. They might say, hey, you know what? I was going to log off for my kid's soccer game, but let me take my laptop with me and actually do some extra work. What's in the mentality of managers that feels like, is it because like if people are happy, they might lose their jobs? Is it like be or be killed type thing? Or what is it that feels like I need to have this complete control over you? I just never fully understand it. Maybe that's why I'm an independent thinker,
Well, we love that you're an independent thinker. You may have heard of Al Capone, the famous gangster. The way he got put in jail was for tax fraud.
Right.
Well, it turns out Al Capone had an accountant named Seth Sideman, no relation. And Seth wrote a book called Memos to the Pivot Man. And a pivot man is somebody in the 1920s, that was the term for it, a middle manager. You have a boss and you have employees. So the people you're talking about aren't evil. They're not mean. They are working for a boss. And they are trying to give their boss what the boss says he or she wants. And where the disconnect happens is the mindset of productivity is this function of how fast can we turn this machine. And yes, we need machines to turn fast, but the machines are now controlled by robots. And so the work that's left for humans isn't easily measured. What it is important. And so it is possible to create the conditions, not for people to go to the soccer match because their boss asked them to, but because they want to make a difference, to create the conditions for possibility. So a year and a half ago, I organized the Carbon Almanac. Not one person, including me, got paid. I worked on it full time for a year. 300 volunteered in 40 countries. And we worked on it 24 hours a day as the time zones passed. We built an award-winning 97,000 word book that got translated into multiple languages. And we did all of it ahead of schedule without one person being a manager, because we created the situation where people could contribute, feel like the contribution was worth something, and where we criticized the work, relentlessly raising the standards, but we never criticized the worker. Mm-hmm. And that is where so many organizations get stuck.
Yeah, because, there's a thing when you're in school, the best teachers are the ones that give you positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the ones that, I remember the mean ones, but I kind of respect them because kids are crazy. but the ones that give you positive reinforcement is like, hey, you can do this. It does something to your soul. Like those are things it doesn't matter what generation you're from. Doesn't matter what year it is. Doesn't matter what technology you may or may not have. Just a positive reinforcement is something that anybody could do. Yeah. But a lot of people choose not.
You can't bully a kid into being great at math. You can bully a kid into tolerating the tests, but to become a field medal winner, you're going to have to love the craft. And when we realize that almost all work is now voluntary, in the sense that you got to work somewhere. You got to feed your family, but it's not like you're in the factory town with no other options. Everyone now has options. So if going there is voluntary, how do you create the conditions so that people eagerly put in the energy that creates better output?
How does artificial intelligence plays into this? Because I like some of the things that's popping up with AI. It's like, oh, okay, this is very cool. But from an employee standpoint, the faster this AI is going, there's going to be a lot of people out of work. So how is AI good? Is AI bad? Is it how we manage it? How do you look at AI?
Well, here's a quick analogy. When they invented email, it didn't put any postal workers out of work. In fact, it dramatically increased the number of packages that got shipped around the country or the world.
Mm-hmm.
AI is going to replace mediocre output. If you're a mediocre writer, I got a computer that can do it for free. If you're a mediocre artist, I got a computer that can do it for free. If you're a mediocre radiologist, I got a computer that can read an X-ray better than you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do mediocre work, it's not good for you. But that means entire organizations that are built on mediocre work, which is another word for average, are going to have to reset. And what it means is we're going to have to create jobs where we use AI to build important stuff, as opposed to simply saying, well, some typing needs to be done. I might as well type something average.
Mm-hmm. It's an amazing thing. So what inspired this book?
So I saw what some billionaires were doing online, brutalizing their people, firing them with glee.
Mm.
I saw the rise of AI and outsourcing and robots. And then I realized personally that I had been through a lot during the pandemic, and so had a lot of other people. We lost people we cared about. And I think a whole bunch of us are starting to realize we don't get tomorrow over again. And we might as well set up a life that we're happy, eager to be part of. And I realized I had something inside of me that I wanted to share. People in my life, people in your life have had trauma. And what we do all day, the 90,000 hours we spend at work, it can go a long way to finding meaning. And meaning is at the heart of being human.
Mm. So at the core of this book, you want to bring workers and bosses together in a lot of ways to try to improve it. But let's say you're a worker and say, wow, this might be a great book for my boss. But the boss is stubborn or the manager is stubborn. What can employees do to help inspire their boss or maybe to make some small changes in their workplace from reading the book?
Well, so the second part is the place to start. What's the smallest unit of significance that would make a difference in your life or in the life of the people you work with or your customers? 5 minutes? Do you have 5 minutes a day where you have the agency to do something? Call a customer, start a book group for the company, whatever it is? You probably do. You're probably not going to get fired for spending 5 minutes doing something meaningful. And if that works, take responsibility and then do 10 minutes. That each of us, we don't have to wait for our boss. Each of us can show up and do the work. But the second thing is, it's a book, because I want you to put it on your boss's desk. You don't even have to sign it. You just have to leave it there. We need to be able to say to each other, let's get real or let's not play. Let's talk about this. Because if we're not going to talk about it, it's not going to get better.
I may have been asking you this question. It's away from the book, but it kind of goes back to your past. So I think in '86, you had started Seth Godin Productions, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And what I read correctly, you started with $20,000 in savings.
From my previous job, yeah.
From your previous job. If you were your same age now, with the same ideas, with all the technology we got today, how would you do it differently than you did it back in the '80s?
It's a great question. So a lot of people listening to this are freelancers. Freelancers are not entrepreneurs. Freelancers are people who get paid when they work. I am a freelancer. I have no staff. This is it. And getting bigger isn't the point. The way you move forward as a freelancer is getting better clients, because better clients make you make bigger promises. They pay on time. They want to pay more. Getting better clients is the work of a freelancer. So when I started out in '86, I knew that there were 15 book publishers in New York City that had a problem, which is they have to publish a new book every couple of days. And they didn't have enough useful, powerful, original ideas or the people to execute them. So their job every day was to go look for new book ideas and then buy them. That was my client, those 15 people. So I thought of new ideas and new ideas and new ideas. And if someone bought one, I made the book. As a freelancer, that's a really good model because I didn't have to use up those $20,000 because all I had to do was pay my rent until I sold something. And then I made enough money to go do it again. Today, it's really hard to make a living selling things to book publishers because there aren't many book publishers and there's plenty of alternatives that are free. So if I was starting out today, I would realize there are many disconnected and lonely people in this world. And some of them are disconnected and lonely at work. And if you built an association, an online group of podcasters, of lobbyists, of people who hybridize plants, of people in the vegan food business, I don't care. And you built a place for them to come together, they would pay to be there. And if you can do this, it's the equivalent of what a conference used to be, but you don't have to build a building. You can just do it online. You get 1,000 people connected and they're each paying you $100 a year. You're in good shape. That's what I would do.
Yeah, I saw there was an interview you did with Rick Roll, I think his Rich Roll, and you, at the beginning of the interview, you had I'm paraphrasing because I think I got this wrong. You said basically everybody's is either a brand or you're invisible or something like that. And so for people who feel like they're invisible, let's say it's like okay, Seth, I want to do something, but I don't know. I've always been in the background. I don't know what my brand is. Like, I don't even know what my niche is. I don't even, I'm just a worker bee. That's what work, I go home. How do I figure out what my brand is? And how can I just grow it from there?
Yeah, it's a great question. So if your motto is you can pick anyone and I'm anyone, you're doomed because we're going to find someone cheaper than you. If the best you can do is get a job at Amazon or Walmart using an ATM where you're just typing your social security number and you're hired, they're not going to treat you well because they know there's someone right behind you that they can treat even worse who will put up with it. So what we need to do is stand for something. And they didn't teach us that in school. In school, they taught us to fit in, not to stand out. But when you stand for something, if you say, guess what? There's a whole bunch of people who collect basketball trading cards. I'm going to start a podcast about basketball trading cards. I'm not going to sell ads on it. I'm just going to become the most interesting voice about basketball trading cards. If you do that and do that and do that, you stand for something now. And if someone calls you up on the phone and says, do you want to talk about baseball trading cards? You say, no, I don't. And you hang up on them because you do basketball trading cards. The point is, instead of worrying about being off the hook, we want to be on the hook, right? So in every town, there are a bunch of doctors who are just general practitioners. And then there's a knee surgeon who only does athletes' knees. That's all she does. Who do you think is busier, right? If you are seen at the best at what you do, whatever it is, even if it's tiny, you will be busier.
So who inspired you? Like, is this just growth as you went along in years, but was there someone in your life that kind of inspired you to become the person you are today?
Oh, it's a very long list. The top of the list for sure are the people who read my work. That what inspires me is seeing what they do with it that I had no idea they would do with it. People I've never met, people who have a different point of view about so many things, doing something with my work, that inspires me to do more of it. In terms of where I've learned stuff, it ranges from my extraordinary parents who aren't with us anymore, who created a foundation for me to take risks, to people like Patti Smith, the author and singer, Ben and Roz Zander. I could just go down this long list of people who run nonprofits, people at the Innocence Project, people who are showing up when there is no guarantee and saying, this is what I see. Do you want to follow me? Let's make something better. And, I met someone a couple of days ago who's building a VC fund for previously underserved entrepreneurs. And to just hear Mac tell his story and how he is on the streets making a difference for people who are making a difference, that gets you out of bed tomorrow, because we got to keep making things better.
What did you learn from the Innocence Project?
So, the Innocence Project is a fascinating way to address an extraordinary injustice. And it turns out that much of the time, many times, when they find someone who is demonstrably innocent, the district attorney doesn't want to instantly let them out and apologize, because none of us like to admit we were wrong. We don't want to even admit our predecessor was wrong. And this brittleness is going to destroy our entire planet. We don't want to admit that gas-powered leaf blowers are a problem. We don't want to admit that we built an entire industry on a foundation of lies. But we must, because it's the only way to make things better. And so when you see the generous persistence of people like Jason Flom and others who are showing up and showing up and showing up without getting a reward, and then something good happens, that's got to be inspiring.
It is inspiring. Like I wish the Innocence Project, I don't know, I wish there was more stories about them, because they're doing work that they're doing a lot of behind the scenes things that people don't realize how much work they're putting in. Let me play Dr. Phil for a second. It's about my dad. So, I recently had a conversation with my dad, and my dad, we got into about something. I always see you on your laptop. Now, he came from an era where, he worked at a car factory and it was tangible, and he just see me just typing away, and he doesn't think I'm making any income at all. And I guess what I'm saying is that I understand that if I want to survive in this digital age, I have to learn about AI. I have to learn about YouTube Shorts. I have to learn about these many things. But I'm fearful of my contemporaries who might be in the 40s, 50s, 60s, where they're not training at all. And going back to the disposable part, a company might come in and say, hey, we got this new thing. We're just going to get rid of you. What can people do to get themselves prepared in case one day they're just deemed as disposable?
It's inevitable that they're going to be deemed as disposable. So will I, so will you. If we don't change, then of course, like, you don't know any blacksmiths, right? You don't know anybody who makes buggy whips, because the world moves forward. And I'm sure your dad worked really hard, but now there's a robot that does his job.
Right.
And that's going to happen. So given that that's going to happen, what do we do about it? Well, the first thing is embrace the fact that turnover is a good thing, not a bad thing. You don't get any prizes for staying in your job for 10 or 20 or 30 years. You just don't. So you're going to have another job. Why don't you get it on your terms instead of waiting until someone kicks you out? And the second thing is, it's very easy, if we feel like we're underwater, to worry about ourselves. But the best way to become indispensable is to be valuable to other people. That if you figure out how to use AI to help other people, then we're not going to get rid of you, because we need you, because you're helping us. And the mindset of, I'm just waiting for my boss to tell me what to do, because my job is to do as little as possible, but enough that I don't get fired. That's not the plan. That's not significance. Instead, spend 2 hours a week that you would ordinarily be spent watching YouTube or Netflix, 2 hours a week building something online. Because guess what? You know how to code as well as almost anyone, because almost no one knows how to code. And there's a whole new generation of stuff to build on video, wherever, that there are no experts. So go become one of those experts.
So you write every day. How do you come up with your topics? Because I get tapped out very, very quickly. So but you're continuously just writing. It's like, how do you come up with your ideas all the time?
Well, so Kevin, I don't know you very well, but I'm guessing that you don't have any trouble talking when you have something to say.
Oh no.
You get out of bed and you say
Yeah.
something and you goes on all day. I just write down what I say. That's all. So the hard part isn't writing. The hard part is figuring out how to say something that other people want to hear. And that's a skill. It's not a talent. I wasn't born with it. And it's available to almost anybody. Just learn to say things that other people need to hear and write them down.
What have you learned about yourself as a writer?
At the beginning, I was sufficiently insecure that I listened to people when they said I needed to write like other people. It needed to fit in. There needed to be an outline. There needed to be a structure. When I pioneered the idea of using slides that had no words on them, I got a lot of pushback because the way you're supposed to do a presentation in PowerPoint is with 7 words on a slide and you just read them to people. My slides had just a picture. That was a breakthrough for me because I realized that all the conventional wisdom that told me to fit in was just trying to protect me from rejection. It wasn't actually true. So that's when I started writing like me instead of trying to write like everybody else. And so what I've learned is my readers generally care about themselves more than they care about me. So my blog posts are about them, not about me. And I try to sound like me when I write. AI, I've asked ChatGPT to write things like me, and it's okay at it, but it's not great at it. And that's my job, is to always be better at sounding like me than AI is.
So when you're not writing and just creating great work, what do you do for fun?
Well, in a week, the little tiny 150-year-old boat club that's on the Hudson River down near me is going to reopen. My handmade canoe is there. It is an extraordinary bargain for $2 a day. So I will be on the Hudson almost every day paddling my canoe. And I teach juggling sometimes, and I'm working on my 4-ball juggle. It's very frustrating. I can get the right hand just fine, but my left hand on the 4-ball juggle, it just keeps. So I got that challenge, and I'm really into jazz. I just built some speakers for my office, and they sound so good, so good. So now I'm trying to talk myself into not being in the speaker business.
Okay. I was going to ask you about how you do build a canoe. And then I was going to ask you about what inspires you to juggle. But now you got me with the jazz. So how did you end up building jazz speakers, even though the juggling is fascinating? But how did you end up building speakers?
All right, well, let's talk about the juggling first.
Yeah.
The secret of juggling is that almost everyone who tries to learn how to juggle is a high performer. High performers don't like dropping balls, so they focus on catching the balls. And as soon as one ball goes a little away, they lunge for it. And the next thing you know, they're out of position.
Right.
Juggling is 100% about throwing the ball. If you throw the ball properly, the catch is easy. And so the metaphor is irresistible. Don't worry about catching. Just keep throwing. Keep throwing until you're good at throwing. The catching will take care of itself. Okay, so the speakers. They used to have speakers that were powered by tube amplifiers. Tube amplifiers are beautiful. They're hard to make, and they put out about 5 or 10 watts of power per channel. And if you're going to do that, you need a very efficient speaker. But when the transistor came along, transistors are super cheap. You can stamp them out. The transistor that powers your car radio is 100 watts per channel, and it costs $1 to make. So lots of amplifiers were made with transistors. But since there was all these power, you can then make speakers more easily because they could absorb a lot of power and sound good. Turns out tube amplifiers are amazing. So I've got a 50-year-old tube amplifier that has tubes in it that are 60 years old, but it only puts out 4 watts per channel.
Oh.
Finding speakers that can sound good with that is not easy. So I found some drivers and I built a baffleless frame, and I had very low expectations, and it just blew my socks off. It's amazing.
So what albums are you playing on your speakers now?
I went deep on Miles and all the bop stuff from the 60s, and then spent a bunch of time. I met Herbie Hancock a couple of times, so he's always a go-to. But I'm lucky enough to know Cyril M.A. who was in New Orleans for a long time, Patricia Barber out of Chicago. I was the honorary producer of one of her records. If you ever get to Chicago on a Monday night, check out a place called the Green Mill. Call ahead to make sure they're still open post-pandemic. But Patricia plays there. It will change your life. The last time I went, I was sitting next to someone who'd flown in from Mumbai just to hear Patricia and her trio.
Wow.
And to hear that music sounding just like it did in Green Mill in my office, it's really special.
That's I mean, I'll check that out the next time I'm in Chicago. Just to talk about Miles Davis for a second. It's funny when they talk about the people who are the greatest of all time. And, there's the Beatles, there's Elvis, there's Michael Jackson, but Miles is never discussed. And if you look at
I discuss him all the time.
I know, but it's just amazing when they have those lists. It's like, where's Miles? Because the stuff that he did was so revolutionary. Like, he could have stayed as a bebop guy. He could have stayed there and been great.
Yeah.
But he just said, no, I'm going to try this.
Yeah.
But he's never in that conversation.
Yeah. It's So Kind of Blue was made in 3 days. One of the 5 best-selling jazz albums of all time.
Right.
If you're a perfectionist, I would ask you, if Miles had spent 20 days making it, would it have been better or would it have been worse? It would have been worse, because the occasional note that's out of sync makes part of the magic happen. The other thing that's amazing about Miles is his side people were at least half the equation. How did that happen? How do you end up working with, Herbie Hancock at the beginning of his career and Bird and everybody else? And the answer is, you create the conditions for people to get to where they want to go. So unlike many band leaders before Miles, he didn't say, you must be in the background, my way or the highway. He said, let's trade fours. And it was this collaborative idea of making music, not making a profit, that made the side people show up. And, the back cover of my book doesn't have any blurbs on it. All it says is, the purpose of a hive is not to make honey. Honey is the byproduct of a successful hive. And I think the same thing is true for Miles and his groups. Half his records were below average. That's just the definition of averages. But the times that they got it right because he made a room where magic could happen.
Right. It does tie back into your book when you talk about teams of putting things back together.
Yeah.
I got a bunch of questions, but I know you got stuff. You have a canoe. I never talked to someone who has built a canoe. So I know you have things to do. So tell me, why should people pick up your book, The Song of Significance?
So a long time ago, I stopped writing books to sell books. If I don't sell any books, it's fine with me. I write books to have a conversation happen. And if people can have the conversation without the book, that's great too. I just need the conversation to happen, because we're getting close to it being too late. We're going to have to figure out how to bring humanity back, how to figure out how to make changes, ignore sunk costs, avoid false proxies, stop judging people by what they look like, stop hiring people who look like us. We're going to have to show up and make big promises and keep them. And we're not going to do that if we don't have the conversation. So that's why I devoted a year of my life to bringing this to the world.
Oh, well, it took you a year to put it together.
Oh, it doesn't take me that long to write a book, but that's the fastest part of the whole process.
I do have another question. So for people who want to be writers, because you've been doing this for a while, and let's say they've had ideas, but they don't know where to start. How do you start?
Okay, so let's understand that publishing a book and writing a book are totally unrelated activities. Publishing is a whole other conversation that you and I can have one day. But writing, if you know who you are writing for, which kind of person you want to read this, and what change you want to make in their world, you can write a book. If you don't know who it's for and you don't know what it's for, don't write a book, because you're just wasting time. So if you know this person's going to change their mind about this, then what you do is you get yourself a $10, $20 digital tape recorder. You find somebody who is supportive and curious and smart, and you go for a walk with them. And for an hour, you teach them what you think people need to know. For an hour, You talk to them, answering their questions to try to change their mind. Then you take that recording and you have it transcribed at rev.com. And now the first draft of your book is done, 40,000 words, 1 hour later. If you can't go for that hour-long walk, you probably don't have a book in you.
That's amazing. I do have one last question.
Okay.
I don't think I'm going canoeing anytime soon, but when you build, if I decide to build a canoe, what type of wood is best? Or maybe it's not wood at all. Maybe it's I don't know what it is. What's the best material? Has to be wood. Okay.
Yeah.
So what type of wood?
Okay. So many of the original tribes of Canada pioneered canoeing. And then a guy in 1920 named Omer Stringer got in a canoe by himself, which you're not supposed to do, tilted it all the way over to the side, which you're not supposed to do, and started doing tricks, made it go sideways and backwards and forwards in circles. Omer Stringer taught Chuck LeBeau. Chuck LeBeau taught me. I have taught thousands of people to maintain the lineage Omer and I paddled together once. That kind of canoe is made with very thin strips of cedar, which is a tree that grows tall and straight. And then you bend them around a frame. And if you really care, you can wrap it in canvas. And that canvas gives it just the right feel. If you are in a place where you can't do that, and I am, then you can use epoxy to make it waterproof. But the canoe itself weighs about 70 pounds, and it's solid and beautiful, and it makes me happy.
What color is it?
I left it the way the wood looks.
That's a good man right there. That's nice. All right, enough. I asked you enough questions.
Seth
Godin, thank you for the conversations. If people want to check you out, where can they go?
Go to seths.blog/song, and you can see videos, and you'll also be a click away from 9,000 blog posts.
All right. Thank you, sir, and have a good day.
Thanks. You're the best. See ya.